The winding roads leading into Willow Creek looked exactly as Ethan Carter remembered them, bordered by towering oak trees whose branches stretched across the pavement like welcoming arms. After nearly 4 years working construction projects in neighboring states, the 24-year-old finally found himself driving toward the small town he had once been desperate to leave behind. Life away from home had given him independence, discipline, and enough savings to begin planning a future of his own. Yet, as the familiar church steeple appeared above the rooftops, he realized some places never truly released their hold on the people who belonged to them. His mother, Linda Carter, stood waiting on the front porch before he had even parked the truck. The moment Ethan stepped out, she hurried toward him with tears filling her eyes. "You've gotten thinner," she said, wrapping him tightly in her arms. He laughed softly. "Hello to you too, Mom. I've missed you every single day." "I missed you too." For the first time in years, the emptiness left behind by his father's death felt a little less overwhelming. Linda had struggled after losing her husband to a sudden heart attack 6 years earlier. Raising Ethan alone while maintaining their aging house had exhausted her emotionally and financially, but she never allowed herself to complain. The house itself reflected those difficult years. Paint peeled from the porch railings, several windows needed replacing, and recent storm damage had weakened part of the roof. Contractors had already begun preparing for extensive renovations that would force Linda to move out temporarily. "It's only for a few weeks," she assured Ethan as they carried his luggage inside. "The repairs can't wait anymore." Ethan nodded, already planning ways to help. Being home meant more than simply visiting. It meant taking care of the woman who had sacrificed everything to give him a stable life. That evening, several relatives gathered for a small welcome dinner. Conversations flowed easily between laughter and old memories. Among everyone present, one person naturally became the center of attention without ever asking for it. Rebecca Carter. Linda's older sister entered carrying homemade food despite everyone insisting she didn't need to bring anything. At 46, Rebecca possessed an effortless confidence that made people trust her almost immediately. She volunteered at church, organized community fundraisers, visited elderly neighbors, and seemed endlessly available whenever someone needed help. "There's our traveler," Rebecca smiled warmly, embracing Ethan. "Look at you. Your father would have been incredibly proud." The mention of his father caught Ethan off guard. "Thank you, Aunt Rebecca. I mean every word." Throughout dinner, Rebecca remembered everyone's favorite meals, refilled empty glasses before anyone noticed, and quietly cleaned dishes while others talked. No one questioned why she always seemed responsible for everyone else's happiness. It was simply who she had always been. More than once, Ethan noticed neighbors stopping by just to thank Rebecca for helping with errands or appointments. She accepted every compliment with modesty, almost embarrassed by the attention. "Rebecca never slows down," one neighbor joked. Linda smiled knowingly. "She's been taking care of everyone since before Ethan was born." Rebecca laughed gently. "Someone has to keep this family together." The words sounded comforting, yet Ethan noticed something unusual. Whenever conversations drifted away from her, Rebecca's expression subtly changed. It lasted only seconds before another smile appeared, but there was unmistakable disappointment hidden behind her eyes. Later that evening, Ethan offered to wash the remaining dishes. "You don't have to," Rebecca said. "I want to help." Standing beside him at the sink, she watched him quietly. "You've changed. I guess 4 years will do that. Not everyone comes home. I always planned to." Rebecca smiled again, though this time it lingered longer than necessary. "I'm glad you did." The following morning, contractors arrived earlier than expected. After inspecting the house, the project manager delivered unwelcome news. "The structural repairs are worse than we thought. Nobody can safely stay here during construction." Linda sighed. "I suppose I'll need a motel." Before Ethan could respond, Rebecca spoke immediately. "Absolutely not." Both turned toward her. "You'll stay with me." Linda hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "You aren't imposing. Family belongs together." Ethan frowned slightly. "What about me?" Rebecca looked directly into his eyes. "You'll stay too." She smiled with calm reassurance. making the offer sound like the most natural solution imaginable. Linda accepted gratefully, relieved their temporary housing problem had disappeared. Ethan agreed without hesitation, believing he was simply moving into the home of the aunt everyone admired and trusted. As they loaded their belongings into Rebecca's car later that afternoon, neither he nor his mother noticed the quiet satisfaction settling behind Rebecca's gentle smile, a hidden emotion that marked the beginning of a far darker chapter in all of their lives. Rebecca's home stood at the edge of Willow Creek, surrounded by towering pines that muffled the sounds of the outside world. The quiet felt comforting during the first few days. Linda settled into the guest room while contractors worked across town, and Ethan spent his mornings helping neighbors with repairs before returning each evening. It seemed like a temporary inconvenience, nothing more. Yet beneath the ordinary routine, invisible lines were beginning to shift in ways no one recognized. Rebecca insisted on handling every meal herself. "You've worked hard all day," she would tell Ethan, placing a warm plate in front of him. "Let me take care of you for once." At first, he accepted the kindness without question. She had always been generous, always eager to help anyone who needed it. Her attention felt no different from the care she showed everyone else. But gradually it became different. She waited for Ethan before eating dinner, even if he returned hours later than expected. She asked about every detail of his day, listening with unusual intensity. If he mentioned speaking with an old friend, she wanted to know the conversation. If he planned to spend an evening outside the house, her smile faded ever so slightly. Linda noticed none of it. She remained preoccupied with insurance paperwork, construction delays, and endless phone calls about the damaged house. Most nights she fell asleep exhausted long before Ethan and Rebecca finished cleaning the kitchen together. One rainy evening, the electricity flickered before disappearing entirely. Rebecca lit several candles throughout the house, their soft glow filling each room with dancing shadows. "I've always hated storms," she admitted quietly. "I didn't know that. I never tell anyone." She stared through the darkened window. "When your uncle left years ago, storms became unbearable. Every loud sound reminded me how empty this house had become." Ethan looked at her with sympathy. "I'm sorry." She forced a faint smile. "People always thanked me for helping everyone else. Nobody ever asked who was helping me." The words lingered in his mind long after the lights returned. From that night forward, Rebecca began sharing more of her loneliness. She spoke about abandoned dreams, failed relationships, and decades spent putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own. Every conversation painted the same picture: a woman who had sacrificed everything without receiving love in return. "You have no idea what it's like," she whispered one evening, "to spend your whole life being needed but never truly wanted." Ethan struggled to answer. "I think people appreciate everything you've done. Appreciation isn't the same as love." He said nothing. Rebecca lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't burden you with my problems." "You aren't. I already have." "No," Ethan replied gently. "Sometimes people just need someone to listen." That simple reassurance changed everything. Rebecca began creating opportunities for those private conversations. She asked Ethan to help organize old photo albums in the attic, repair loose shelves in her bedroom, and accompany her on grocery trips that could easily have been completed alone. Each task seemed harmless by itself, yet together they ensured they spent increasing amounts of time isolated from everyone else. Whenever Ethan attempted to visit friends or leave the house, Rebecca found another reason to keep him nearby. "I can't reach the box on the top shelf. My car is making a strange noise. I've had one of my headaches again." None of the requests sounded unreasonable. Still, Ethan noticed how guilty he felt whenever he declined. Weeks passed. The emotional distance between them quietly disappeared. Rebecca started resting her hand on his shoulder during conversations. She embraced him longer than before whenever thanking him for helping around the house. If he appeared distracted, she asked repeatedly whether she had done something wrong. "You aren't pulling away from me, are you?" she asked one afternoon. "What? No. You promise?" "Promise." She smiled with visible relief. "I don't know why losing people scares me so much." Ethan believed her fear came from years of disappointment. He convinced himself that offering reassurance was simply an act of compassion toward someone who had spent her entire life caring for others. Then came the evening that neither of them could ever erase. Linda stayed overnight with a cousin to discuss renovation expenses, leaving Rebecca and Ethan alone in the house. Hours of emotional conversation blurred into tears, apologies, and desperate confessions of loneliness. Rebecca admitted she no longer knew where healthy affection ended and emotional dependence began. Ethan tried to comfort her, believing he could calm her overwhelming despair. Instead, the fragile boundaries that had protected them finally collapsed. The moment passed almost as quickly as it began, replaced immediately by horrified silence. Neither spoke. Neither could fully comprehend what had happened. Ethan stepped away first, his face drained of color. This can't ever happen again. Rebecca covered her face with trembling hands, unable to look at him. No one can know. The weight of what they had done settled over the room like a suffocating fog. Shame replaced emotion. Fear overwhelmed reason. By sunrise, they silently agreed to bury the truth forever, never imagining that the secret they believed would destroy their family was only the beginning of a far more devastating nightmare. Morning arrived after that terrible night, but neither Ethan nor Rebecca spoke about what had happened. They avoided each other's eyes during breakfast, answering Linda's cheerful questions with short, distracted replies. For a brief moment, Ethan convinced himself the nightmare was over. It had been a terrible mistake born from loneliness, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. If they ignored it long enough, perhaps it would disappear like a bad dream. He was wrong. Within days, Rebecca found excuses to be alone with him again. Every conversation carried the weight of the secret they shared. "We can't pretend it never happened," she whispered one afternoon while Linda was visiting the construction site. "We have to. I've tried. You have to keep trying." Rebecca looked at him with glistening eyes. "I can't stop thinking about you." The words filled Ethan with dread instead of comfort. Once Linda moved back into her renovated home, Ethan believed distance would finally solve everything. He packed his belongings with visible relief, thanking Rebecca for letting them stay in her house. As he carried the last box to his truck, Rebecca stopped him near the front porch. "So that's it? It's better this way." "For who?" "For everyone." She stepped closer. "You think moving out changes anything?" "It has to." Rebecca's smile disappeared. "You don't understand how deeply we're connected now." Ethan drove away without answering, hoping the miles between them would restore the boundaries they had lost. Instead, Rebecca refused to let him go. At first, her messages sounded harmless. "Did you get home safely? Have you eaten today? I miss talking to you." When Ethan responded less frequently, the messages multiplied. "Why are you ignoring me? Did I do something wrong? Please answer." If hours passed without a reply, she called repeatedly until he finally picked up. "I've just been busy," Ethan explained one evening. "You've been avoiding me. I'm trying to move forward. So you're abandoning me." "I'm not abandoning anyone." Rebecca's voice cracked. "Everyone leaves eventually." Guilt settled heavily inside him. He continued answering her calls, believing kindness would ease her pain. Instead, every conversation pulled him deeper into the emotional prison he desperately wanted to escape. Weeks turned into months. Rebecca began appearing unexpectedly wherever Ethan happened to be. She visited the hardware store where he worked, claiming she needed supplies she never purchased. She waited outside the local diner after learning he met coworkers there every Friday. She even attended community events she had never shown interest in before. Each encounter seemed accidental. Eventually, Ethan realized none of them were. "You've been following me," he said quietly after seeing her outside his workplace for the third time in 1 week. Rebecca looked genuinely offended. "I came because I wanted to see you. Without telling me, I knew you'd say no." Her answer frightened him more than any denial could have. The emotional pressure intensified. Whenever Ethan mentioned meeting friends or considering a relationship with someone his own age, Rebecca became visibly distressed. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." "I never promised that." "You promised you cared." "I do care." "Then prove it." Every conversation ended the same way, with Rebecca crying, apologizing, and insisting she had nobody else in the world. Ethan stopped sleeping well. He lost interest in work, avoided friends, and withdrew from his mother, terrified she might notice something was terribly wrong. Every phone notification filled him with anxiety. Every unexpected knock at the door made his heart race. The secret consumed every part of his life. One evening, after ignoring Rebecca's calls for nearly 2 days, she appeared outside Linda's house. "If you don't speak to me," she said through tears, "I'll tell everyone what happened." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "You wouldn't. They'll believe me." Rebecca's expression hardened. "I'll tell them you started everything. You know that's not true." "Doesn't matter." She folded her arms. "They'll see a respected woman who spent her life helping others." She paused before delivering the words that haunted him. "And they'll see a young man nobody will ever forgive." For several long seconds, Ethan could not breathe. He finally understood that the relationship was no longer built on guilt or misplaced affection. It was control. Over the following weeks, Rebecca alternated between desperate apologies and ruthless threats. One day she begged him not to disappear. The next, she warned she would destroy his life if he abandoned her. The emotional cycle left Ethan exhausted. Then, late one autumn afternoon, he made his decision. He asked Rebecca to meet him at a quiet park overlooking Willow Creek. She arrived smiling hopefully. "I knew you'd come back." Ethan remained standing. "No." Her smile faded. "I'm ending this. You've said that before. This time I mean it. You can't." "I can." Rebecca reached for his hand, but he stepped backward. "If you threaten me again or contact me again, I'll tell the truth myself." Her face turned pale. "You wouldn't ruin both our lives." "My life is already ruined." Without waiting for another response, Ethan turned and walked away. Behind him, Rebecca called his name again and again, her desperate voice echoing across the empty park. He never looked back. For the first time in months, Ethan believed he had finally escaped her control. He had no way of knowing that Rebecca's obsession had already evolved into something even darker, and that the consequences of their secret were about to become horrifyingly irreversible. 750 words walking away from Rebecca in the park should have brought Ethan Carter peace. Instead, the weeks that followed felt strangely unsettling. He blocked her number, ignored unfamiliar calls, and buried himself in long shifts at the hardware store. Outwardly, life seemed to return to normal. His mother noticed he smiled more often, and friends slowly convinced him to join them for weekend barbecues and fishing trips. Yet beneath that fragile appearance of recovery, his body was beginning to betray him. It started with exhaustion. No matter how much sleep Ethan got, he woke feeling as though he had worked through the night. He blamed the demanding hours at work and the emotional strain of the past several months. Then came persistent headaches, followed by low-grade fevers that appeared without warning. Some mornings he found swollen glands along his neck. Other days he felt sharp aches in his muscles that refused to disappear. Linda watched him push food around his plate one evening. "You don't look well. I'm probably coming down with the flu. You've been saying that for 3 weeks. I'll be fine." But he wasn't. One afternoon, while unloading lumber at work, dizziness overwhelmed him. The world tilted, his knees weakened, and he collapsed before coworkers could catch him. Though he regained consciousness within moments, everyone insisted he visit a doctor immediately. Reluctantly, Ethan scheduled an appointment at Willow Creek Medical Center. Dr. Melissa Harper conducted a thorough examination, asking detailed questions about his symptoms, recent illnesses, and medical history. Routine blood work was ordered along with several additional laboratory tests. "It may be something simple," she reassured him, "but I'd rather rule everything out than make assumptions." Ethan appreciated her calm professionalism. 2 days later, the clinic called unexpectedly. "Mr. Carter," the receptionist said gently, "Dr. Harper would like you to come in today. She'd prefer discussing your results in person." The request alone made his stomach tighten. When Ethan entered the consultation room, Dr. Harper's expression was noticeably more serious than before. She waited until he sat down before speaking. Some of your blood tests came back with unexpected findings. He leaned forward nervously. What kind of findings? She folded her hands carefully. One of the screening tests was positive for HIV. The words echoed through the room. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared at her. There has to be a mistake. We performed a confirmatory test. She paused gently. It confirmed the diagnosis. His breathing became uneven. No. Dr. Harper explained modern treatments, long-term management, and how people living with HIV could lead healthy lives with early medical care. Ethan heard every word without truly processing any of them. Only one question repeated inside his mind. How? Driving home became a blur. He parked beside an empty lake instead of returning to the house, sitting motionless for nearly an hour. He had never used intravenous drugs. He had never received contaminated blood. He had only been intimate with one person during the past year, Rebecca. The realization struck him with horrifying clarity. His hands trembled as he searched old messages before finally dialing a number he had sworn never to call again. Rebecca answered immediately. I knew you'd contact me eventually. We need to talk. Her voice remained strangely calm. I'll be home. That evening, Ethan entered Rebecca's living room carrying nothing except the crushing weight of unanswered questions. She offered him coffee. He ignored it. I tested positive for HIV. Rebecca's face remained unreadable. Silence filled the room. You knew, didn't you? He asked quietly. She looked down before speaking. Yes. The single word shattered him. You already knew? I've known for years. Ethan stepped backward in disbelief. You never told me. Couldn't. You wouldn't. Rebecca finally met his eyes. If I had told you, you never would have stayed. You infected me. Tears formed in Ethan's eyes. You let me believe I was making choices when you already knew the truth. Rebecca inhaled slowly, showing neither panic nor regret. My diagnosis destroyed everything. That doesn't explain this. It explains everything. Her voice hardened. I lost relationships. I lost my future. I watched everyone treat me differently. She took another slow breath. If I could never have a normal life. She looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Then neither could you. The sentence landed with chilling finality. Ethan felt physically sick. While Rebecca continued speaking, trying to justify years of resentment and bitterness, he quietly slipped his phone from his pocket beneath the table. His thumb pressed the recording application without drawing attention. I loved you, Rebecca insisted. No, Ethan whispered. You trapped me. You don't understand what loneliness does to people. I understand exactly what you did. The conversation continued for several agonizing minutes. Rebecca admitted concealing her diagnosis because she feared permanent rejection. She insisted fate had been cruel to her first and claimed Ethan's suffering simply balanced an unfair world. Every word was captured by the hidden recording. Finally, Ethan stood. I never want to see you again. Rebecca made no effort to stop him. As he reached the front door, she spoke one final sentence. You can tell anyone you want. He turned slowly. No one will ever understand us. Ethan walked into the cold night, clutching the phone inside his jacket. The recording felt insignificant compared to the devastation consuming him, yet somewhere beneath the overwhelming grief, he recognized it as the first piece of proof against a woman whose betrayal had destroyed far more than his trust. He had no idea that Rebecca's obsession was far from over, or that the greatest danger to his life was still waiting ahead. 700 words. The recording remained in Ethan Carter's pocket throughout the drive home, yet it brought him no comfort. Rebecca's confession proved she had deliberately concealed her HIV diagnosis, but listening to her cold admission only deepened the horror. Every sentence replayed endlessly in his mind. Sleep became almost impossible. Whenever he closed his eyes, he heard her voice repeating the same chilling words. If I could never have a normal life, neither could you. Days blended into weeks. The once outgoing young man gradually disappeared behind locked doors and drawn curtains. Friends called, inviting him to fishing trips, basketball games, and weekend cookouts. But Ethan declined every invitation with tired excuses. I'm working late. I'm not feeling well. Maybe next time. Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. Linda noticed the change immediately. "You hardly leave your room anymore," she said gently one evening. "I'm just tired." "You've been tired for months. I'll get through it." She reached across the dinner table. "You know you can tell me anything." Ethan forced a weak smile, unable to meet her eyes. "I know." The lie tasted bitter. He wanted desperately to tell his mother everything. He wanted to explain why he looked terrified whenever his phone vibrated, why he avoided family gatherings, and why every mirror reminded him of a future he no longer recognized. Yet shame wrapped itself around every attempt to speak. He imagined the disbelief, the disgust, and the endless questions about how such a relationship had ever happened. Silence felt easier. Rebecca ensured it stayed that way. Although Ethan had blocked her number, unfamiliar calls continued appearing from different phones. When he ignored them, emails arrived instead. "Please let me explain. I never wanted this. We belong together." At first, the messages sounded remorseful. Then their tone shifted. "If you tell anyone, I'll tell them you pursued me. Who do you think they'll believe? You'll destroy your mother before you destroy me." Each message tightened the knot already growing inside his chest. Rather than deleting them, Ethan created a password-protected folder on his laptop. He saved every email, voicemail, and text message. He carefully wrote dates, times, and brief summaries inside a notebook, documenting every unwanted contact. He did not fully understand why he was preserving the evidence. He only knew he might need it someday. Meanwhile, Dr. Melissa Harper referred him to infectious disease specialist Dr. Samuel Ortiz, whose office was located in the neighboring city. Unlike the hurried appointments Ethan had imagined, their first consultation lasted nearly an hour. Dr. Ortiz reviewed his laboratory results before looking directly at him. "First, I want you to understand something important." Ethan remained silent. "This diagnosis does not mean your life is over. Feels like it is. It isn't." The doctor's calm confidence felt unfamiliar. "We have highly effective treatment. If you take your medication consistently, you can expect to live a long, healthy life." Ethan nodded mechanically. "The medicine helps," he whispered. "It does. But it doesn't erase what happened." Dr. Ortiz studied him carefully. "You're carrying more than a medical diagnosis." The observation caught Ethan off guard. For several moments, neither man spoke. Finally, Ethan reached into his backpack and removed the small notebook containing months of messages. "It wasn't an accident." Dr. Ortiz frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "My aunt knew." The words escaped almost involuntarily. "She already had HIV before." His voice broke. "Before she started a relationship with me." Silence settled over the room. Dr. Ortiz did not interrupt. He simply listened. Slowly, Ethan described the manipulation, the emotional dependence, the threats, and finally Rebecca's confession. He even played a short portion of the recording captured on his phone. When it ended, the doctor's expression had changed completely. "I'm very sorry." Ethan lowered his head. "I keep wondering whether this is somehow my fault." "It is not." Dr. Ortiz spoke firmly. "You were deceived. I should have walked away sooner." Manipulation often convinces victims they're responsible for someone else's choices. Ethan stared quietly at the floor. "You've been carrying this alone for far too long." The doctor leaned forward. "What happened to you may have serious legal consequences. I don't want people knowing." "I understand." He paused. "But silence protects the wrong person." Those words lingered with Ethan long after the appointment ended. For the first time since receiving his diagnosis, someone had listened without judgment, believed every painful detail, and reminded him that surviving did not require suffering in isolation. Driving home, Ethan realized the evidence he had collected was no longer simply a record of his fear. It had become the foundation of the truth. As Rebecca's messages continued growing more desperate and unpredictable, Ethan finally began considering the possibility that exposing her actions might be the only way to stop her. He did not yet know where to turn or who would believe such an unimaginable story, but the decision he had avoided for months was drawing closer with every threatening message that appeared on his phone. Dr. Samuel Ortiz's words echoed in Ethan Carter's mind for several restless days. Silence protects the wrong person. Every time his phone buzzed with another threatening message from Rebecca, the truth of that statement became harder to ignore. He had spent months believing that exposing their secret would destroy his family beyond repair. Now he realized remaining silent gave Rebecca complete control over his life. With trembling hands and a folder containing every message, recording, and handwritten note, Ethan finally walked into the Willow Creek Police Department. The front desk officer greeted him politely before leading him to a quiet interview room. A few minutes later, Detective Sarah Bennett entered carrying a legal pad and a cup of coffee. She appeared to be in her early 40s, calm and observant, with the composed expression of someone who had spent years listening to painful stories without allowing emotion to cloud judgment. "I'm Detective Bennett," she said gently. "Take your time. Start wherever you feel comfortable." Ethan stared at the table for several seconds. "What I'm about to tell you sounds impossible. I've learned that impossible things sometimes turn out to be true." Her steady voice gave him enough courage to begin. For nearly 2 hours, Ethan recounted everything from the day he moved into Rebecca's home until the devastating medical diagnosis. Several times his voice cracked under the weight of guilt and humiliation, but Bennett never interrupted except to clarify details. When he finished, he placed his phone and notebook on the table. "I recorded part of her confession." Bennett accepted the device carefully. "May I listen?" Ethan nodded. The room fell silent as Rebecca's voice filled the speaker. "If I could never have a normal life, then neither could you." When the recording ended, Detective Bennett quietly turned off the phone. "This changes everything," she said. Within hours, an official investigation was opened. Search warrants and subpoenas followed. Detectives obtained Rebecca's medical records through the proper legal process, reviewing years of documented appointments. The files revealed that she had been diagnosed with HIV several years before Ethan returned to Willow Creek. More importantly, every consultation contained detailed notes showing physicians had repeatedly counseled her about the legal and ethical obligation to disclose her diagnosis before engaging in intimate relationships. One entry caught Bennett's attention immediately. Patient demonstrates understanding of disclosure requirements and confirms awareness of potential criminal liability for intentional non-disclosure. Bennett read the sentence twice. "There goes any claim she didn't know," she quietly remarked to her partner. The investigation widened. Digital forensic specialists received authorization to examine Rebecca's laptop, tablet, and online activity. What they discovered transformed an already disturbing case into something far more sinister. Months before Ethan had moved into her home, Rebecca had searched dozens of topics. Can someone prove HIV transmission? Criminal charges for hiding HIV status. How long should medical records be kept? Ways to avoid prosecution after non-disclosure. Each search was carefully preserved as evidence. Detective Bennett studied the timeline spread across the conference room wall. "These weren't panic searches after the relationship," she observed. "They happened beforehand." Her partner nodded. "Looks premeditated." Bennett refused to jump to conclusions, but every new piece of evidence strengthened the pattern emerging before them. Meanwhile, investigators interviewed healthcare providers, neighbors, and relatives. Everyone described Rebecca the same way: kind, generous, selfless. No one could reconcile that image with the evidence accumulating inside police files. Even Linda Carter struggled to believe what detectives cautiously explained. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. "My sister isn't capable of something like this." Bennett answered with compassion. "We're following evidence, not assumptions." Word of police activity around Rebecca's property spread quickly through Willow Creek. Although detectives kept the investigation confidential, Rebecca noticed unfamiliar vehicles near her home and recognized plainclothes officers watching discreetly from a distance. For the first time in months, genuine fear entered her carefully controlled world. She stopped attending church. Community events no longer interested her. Curtains remained closed throughout the day. Inside her house, unopened mail piled across the kitchen table, while television news played constantly in the background. Every unexpected knock at the door made her heart race. One evening, she replayed Ethan's final words in the park. "If you threaten me again or contact me again, I'll tell the truth myself. Now he had. Rebecca understood exactly what investigators would eventually uncover. The counseling records, the internet searches, the confession. If Ethan testified, everything she had spent years hiding would become public forever. Her carefully constructed reputation would collapse overnight. Sitting alone in the darkened living room, she opened a drawer containing old photographs of happier family gatherings. Her fingers rested briefly on one picture before she slowly closed the album. A different thought had already begun replacing regret. If Ethan disappeared before charges were filed, perhaps the evidence alone would never tell the entire story. As that dangerous possibility settled into her mind, Rebecca quietly began preparing for a final confrontation, convincing herself that eliminating the only living witness was the last chance to save the life she believed was already slipping beyond her control. Rebecca Carter spent several sleepless nights convincing herself there was still one way to survive the investigation. Detective Sarah Bennett had uncovered too much, but cases still depended on witnesses. Evidence could be challenged. Records could be questioned. Memories could be attacked. Ethan, however, could not be allowed to testify. The thought horrified her the first time it entered her mind. By the end of the week, it felt less like a choice and more like the only path she believed remained. She composed a brief message from an unfamiliar phone. "Please come. I'm ready to tell the police everything. I can't live with this anymore. You deserve the truth." One last conversation. Ethan stared at the text for several minutes. His first instinct was to ignore it. Then he remembered Detective Bennett's advice. If Rebecca truly intended to confess, her statement could strengthen the investigation and spare his mother the agony of a prolonged trial. Before leaving, Ethan forwarded the message to Detective Bennett and sent another. "She wants to meet tonight. I'll let you know when I leave." Bennett immediately replied, "Be careful. Don't go inside alone if anything feels wrong. Call me afterward." Ethan promised he would. As dusk settled over Willow Creek, he drove toward the familiar house surrounded by towering pine trees. Months earlier, he had arrived there believing it was the safest place in town. Now every shadow felt threatening. Rebecca opened the front door before he reached the porch. "You came. You said you wanted to confess." "I do." Her voice sounded unusually calm. Inside, the house appeared almost untouched since the day he had walked away. Family photographs still lined the hallway. Fresh coffee sat untouched on the kitchen table. The quiet felt unnatural. "I've been thinking," Rebecca began softly. "So have I. I'm tired of lying." Ethan remained standing. "Then tell the truth." Rebecca lowered her eyes. "I never wanted any of this to happen. You had countless chances to stop it." "I know." For a brief moment, Ethan believed she was finally accepting responsibility. Then her expression changed. "What evidence do they actually have?" He frowned. "What? The police. What exactly have you given them?" Realization swept over him. This isn't about confessing. Rebecca's shoulders stiffened. "You recorded me, didn't you?" Ethan hesitated only briefly. "Yes." Her breathing quickened. "I knew something felt wrong that night. You admitted everything. You tricked me. No, you told the truth." Rebecca's composure shattered. "You had no right. I had every right. You destroyed my life. You destroyed mine first." The room fell silent. Rebecca's eyes darted toward the hallway leading to the basement. Then, without warning, she grabbed a heavy glass vase from a nearby table and swung it toward Ethan. He raised his arm instinctively. The vase shattered against his forearm, sending broken glass across the hardwood floor. "What are you doing? You can't leave here." Ethan stumbled backward, reaching for his pocket. Rebecca lunged again. Furniture crashed as they collided against the dining room table. Ethan struggled desperately to push her away while she clawed at his jacket, searching frantically for his phone. "You gave them everything. I told the truth. No one will believe anything if you're gone." Her words chilled him more than the attack itself. As they fought across the living room, Ethan finally managed to pull his phone free. His thumb pressed the emergency recording shortcut before the device slipped beneath a nearby chair. Every desperate shout echoed through the room. "Rebecca, stop. You forced this." I never wanted to hurt you. You already did. She seized a heavy fireplace poker resting beside the stone hearth. Ethan backed away, breathing hard. This doesn't have to end like this. It already has. She charged forward. The struggle became frantic and chaotic. Ethan tried to block each desperate swing while searching for any path toward the front door. Tables overturned. Picture frames crashed onto the floor. Blood from cuts on his hands stained the broken glass beneath their feet. Finally, Rebecca struck him with enough force to send him crashing against the basement door. He collapsed onto the wooden steps. Pain exploded through his body. The phone continued recording from beneath the chair, capturing every cry, every impact, every horrifying second. Rebecca followed him down the narrow staircase. No more lies, Ethan gasped weakly. There won't be. Moments later, the struggle ended in devastating silence. Rebecca stood motionless, staring at what she had done. Her breathing slowly steadied. Then survival instincts replaced panic. Working mechanically, she wiped obvious fingerprints from nearby surfaces, repositioned scattered furniture, and placed the fireplace poker near Ethan's outstretched hand. She scratched her own forearms against splintered wood and deliberately tore part of her sleeve, creating injuries that supported a claim of self-defense. She rehearsed the story repeatedly. Ethan had become violent. She had feared for her life. She had no choice. After dialing emergency services with trembling but carefully controlled emotion, Rebecca waited beside the body, convinced the only witness capable of exposing her crimes had been permanently silenced. She never noticed the phone still hidden beneath the overturned chair, its emergency recording preserving every word of the confrontation. Nor did she realize that investigators led by Detective Sarah Bennett were already driving toward the property after receiving Ethan's final message. Unaware they were about to uncover a crime scene whose smallest overlooked detail would ultimately destroy Rebecca's carefully constructed deception forever. The flashing red and blue lights outside Rebecca Carter's home illuminated the quiet street long before sunrise. Patrol officers secured the property, while paramedics confirmed what everyone already feared. Ethan Carter was dead. Rebecca sat on the back porch wrapped in a blanket, her hands trembling as she repeated the same story to every officer who approached. He attacked me first, she whispered. I begged him to leave, but he wouldn't stop. When Detective Sarah Bennett arrived, she watched Rebecca carefully before saying a single word. Months of investigation had taught her that appearances often concealed uncomfortable truths. She offered no opinion, asked no accusatory questions, and simply instructed the crime scene team to document everything exactly as they found it. Inside the house, nothing felt right. The living room showed signs of a violent struggle, yet several overturned chairs appeared strangely deliberate, almost as if they had been placed rather than knocked aside. Broken glass lay concentrated in one corner, while blood droplets extended toward the basement staircase in a pattern that suggested movement instead of a single defensive encounter. Bennett crouched beside the evidence markers. If this started here, she said quietly to the lead forensic analyst, why are the blood transfers heading away from the front door instead of toward it? The analyst nodded. It doesn't fit a straightforward self-defense claim. Rebecca insisted Ethan had cornered her inside the basement before she grabbed the fireplace poker to protect herself. Yet investigators immediately noticed injuries on Ethan's arms and hands that resembled defensive wounds rather than offensive ones. Every new observation raised another question. Every answer Rebecca offered created another contradiction. While photographing the damaged living room, a forensic technician noticed something partially hidden beneath an overturned wooden chair. I've got a phone. The screen was cracked beyond recognition, but the device remained intact. Detective Bennett immediately recognized it. That's Ethan's. The phone was carefully packaged and transported to the digital forensic laboratory, where specialists began extracting recoverable data. Hours later, Bennett received the call she had been hoping for. We recovered several recordings. She drove directly to the lab. The first audio file contained Rebecca's earlier confession inside her home. If I could never have a normal life, then neither could you. The room fell silent as investigators listened. Then came the second recording. It began with the sound of a front door opening. Rebecca's calm greeting. Ethan demanding the truth. their argument escalating, furniture crashing across hardwood floors. Rebecca shouting, "You can't leave here." Ethan pleading, "Rebecca, stop." Finally, the unmistakable sounds of the fatal struggle echoed through the speakers before ending in terrible silence. No one spoke after the recording finished. Detective Bennett slowly removed her headphones. She planned to blame him from the beginning. The evidence continued growing. Blood pattern specialists reconstructed the movement throughout the house using photographs, measurements, and laboratory testing. Their analysis showed Ethan had repeatedly retreated while bleeding, contradicting Rebecca's claim that he had aggressively pursued her. Impact marks on the walls matched multiple defensive attempts rather than a sustained attack. The broken vase fragments contained Ethan's blood, but almost none of Rebecca's. Nothing supported her version. Meanwhile, digital investigators completed a detailed examination of Rebecca's electronic devices. Months before Ethan ever moved into her home, Rebecca had searched legal definitions of intentional HIV transmission, criminal penalties, methods investigators used to establish disclosure, and strategies defendants had attempted in similar prosecutions. Additional searches painted an even darker picture. How reliable are phone recordings in court? Can deleted messages be recovered? Self-defense requirements after killing someone. Detective Bennett stared at the timeline displayed across the conference room screen. She anticipated every stage. Another investigator nodded, until she overlooked one phone. Rebecca's carefully rehearsed statement collapsed under the weight of overwhelming evidence. The confession, the emergency recording, the documented counseling records proving she understood her legal obligations. The internet searches showing preparation months before the relationship. The forensic reconstruction disproving self-defense. Each discovery strengthened the next until no reasonable explanation remained except deliberate deception followed by calculated murder. News of Ethan's death spread rapidly through Willow Creek, leaving neighbors stunned. The woman who had spent years organizing charity drives and comforting grieving families was now accused of betraying her own nephew in one of the county's most disturbing criminal investigations. For Linda Carter, the truth proved almost impossible to comprehend. She mourned her son while struggling to reconcile every childhood memory of her sister with the evidence now filling police files. Detective Bennett understood the emotional devastation reaching far beyond the crime scene. This case isn't only about homicide, she told prosecutors during a briefing. It's about manipulation, calculated infection, abuse of trust, and a murder committed to silence the victim forever. By the time investigators completed their final reports, Rebecca's fabricated story had completely unraveled. Formal charges were prepared, arrest warrants were finalized, and the evidence was organized for trial. As officers moved to take Rebecca into custody, Bennett knew the courtroom would soon hear every horrifying detail, but she also understood that no conviction could restore the life Ethan had lost or erase the lasting scars left on everyone who had once trusted the woman responsible. Rebecca Carter's arrest marked the end of the investigation, but for everyone connected to the case, it was only the beginning of another painful chapter. Months passed as prosecutors assembled thousands of pages of evidence, interviewed expert witnesses, and prepared to present one of the most disturbing criminal cases Willow Creek had ever witnessed. By the time the trial began, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, residents, and families seeking answers that no verdict could truly provide. Inside the courtroom, Rebecca appeared almost unrecognizable. The confident woman once admired throughout the community now sat quietly beside her defense attorneys, avoiding eye contact with the spectators filling every bench. Across the aisle, Linda Carter held a photograph of Ethan against her chest, surrounded by relatives struggling to contain their grief. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered the courtroom, and the proceedings officially began. The prosecutor stood before the jury. This case is about calculated deception, abuse of trust, and a murder committed to silence the only person capable of exposing the truth. The defense responded differently. Rebecca's attorney described her as a deeply damaged woman whose years of loneliness, untreated emotional trauma, and declining mental health had impaired her judgment. She made terrible mistakes, he admitted. But terrible mistakes are not always calculated crimes. Over the following days, Jurors listened as witness after witness reconstructed the tragedy. Detective Sarah Bennett carefully explained the investigation from Ethan's first report through the discovery of the hidden phone recording. Photographs of the crime scene appeared on courtroom monitors while Bennett identified blood evidence, recovered messages, and the timeline proving Rebecca's actions before and after the killing. The prosecutor asked one final question. Detective Bennett, based on your investigation, did the evidence support Rebecca Carter's claim of self-defense? No. What did it support? A deliberate attempt to eliminate the primary witness against her. The courtroom remained silent. Next came the forensic specialists. Blood pattern analysts demonstrated how Ethan had retreated throughout the house while suffering repeated injuries. Digital experts explained how deleted files, internet searches, and recovered recordings revealed months of preparation and deception. Every technical detail dismantled another part of Rebecca's story. Perhaps the most emotional testimony came from Dr. Samuel Ortiz. Speaking with calm professionalism, he explained modern HIV treatment while emphasizing a critical principle. Informed consent requires truthful disclosure. The prosecutor nodded. If someone knowingly conceals an HIV diagnosis before an intimate relationship, can the other person make an informed decision? No, Dr. Ortiz paused briefly. Without disclosure, meaningful consent is impossible. Medical records introduced into evidence confirmed Rebecca had received repeated counseling explaining both the health risks and her legal obligation to disclose her diagnosis before any intimate relationship. She knew. She understood. She chose silence. When Rebecca finally took the witness stand, she spoke softly, often through tears. I loved Ethan. The prosecutor remained composed. Did you tell him you were HIV positive before becoming intimate? Rebecca hesitated. No. Why not? I was terrified. She described years of isolation, failed relationships, and overwhelming fear of rejection. She insisted emotional dependence clouded her judgment until she no longer recognized healthy boundaries. Her attorney argued diminished mental stability. The prosecution responded with evidence. Internet searches conducted months beforehand. Medical counseling records. The recorded confession. The emergency audio documenting the murder. Each exhibit contradicted her claims of impulsive behavior. During closing arguments, the prosecutor addressed the jury directly. Fear explains many human actions. He paused. It does not excuse calculated deception, intentional infection, or murder. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned. Rebecca stood as the clerk read each verdict. Guilty of intentional HIV transmission. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of first-degree murder. Rebecca closed her eyes. The courtroom remained completely still. Before sentencing concluded, Judge Whitmore invited Linda Carter to deliver her victim impact statement. Linda approached the podium carrying Ethan's framed photograph. Her hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. My son believed kindness could heal broken people. She looked briefly toward Rebecca. He pitied your loneliness. Tears rolled down her face. You repaid his compassion with lies. The room was silent except for quiet sobs from the gallery. You didn't just take Ethan's future. Linda held the photograph closer. You stole every birthday he would never celebrate, every child he would never raise, and every dream he never had the chance to finish. Even several jurors struggled to hide their emotions. Judge Whitmore imposed multiple consecutive sentences, ensuring Rebecca would spend the remainder of her life behind prison walls. As deputies escorted her from the courtroom, she glanced back one final time. No one met her eyes. Outside, cameras captured the conclusion of a case that had forever changed Willow Creek. Yet for Linda, Detective Bennett, and everyone who had loved Ethan, justice felt incomplete. A conviction could punish the guilty, but it could never restore the life that had been stolen. In the months that followed, those left behind would each search for a different way to transform unimaginable loss into something that might protect others from suffering the same devastating fate. The trial ended, the verdict was delivered, and the cameras eventually disappeared from the courthouse steps. Yet for the people whose lives had been shattered, justice was never a finish line. It was simply the beginning of learning how to live with an absence that could never be filled. Willow Creek slowly returned to its peaceful routines, but reminders of Ethan Carter lingered in quiet places. A favorite fishing spot by the lake, the hardware store where he had greeted customers with an easy smile, and the park where he had found the courage to walk away from Rebecca for the final time. Linda Carter spent the first months after the trial surrounded by grief. Every room in her home carried memories of her son. His jacket still hung beside the front door. His coffee mug remained in the kitchen cabinet exactly where he had left it. Some mornings she reached for the telephone before remembering there would never be another call from Ethan again. Eventually, she realized grief could either consume the rest of her life or become the reason someone else's life might be saved. With support from local volunteers, healthcare professionals, and several organizations that had quietly followed Ethan's case, Linda established the Ethan Carter Foundation. Its mission extended far beyond memorializing her son. The foundation offered educational programs about emotional manipulation, healthy relationship boundaries, informed consent, and accurate information about HIV. Linda insisted that every seminar include one important message. Knowledge fights both deception and stigma. She refused to allow Ethan's story to become another source of fear surrounding HIV. Medical experts regularly spoke about modern treatment, prevention, and the importance of compassion toward those living responsibly with the condition. At the same time, counselors educated families about recognizing coercive control, emotional abuse, and manipulative relationships before they escalated into irreversible tragedies. Attendance grew steadily. Some visitors came seeking information. Others arrived carrying painful secrets of their own. Many quietly thanked Linda afterward for creating a place where shame no longer controlled the conversation. Across town, Detective Sarah Bennett completed the final paperwork before placing Ethan's case file inside the department archives. She paused briefly, looking at the thick folder that documented months of investigation. During her career, Bennett had investigated murders motivated by greed, revenge, jealousy, and desperation. None had affected her quite like this one. The evidence revealed something she would never forget. Hatred had not started the tragedy. Obsession had. A desperate need to possess another person had gradually destroyed every remaining trace of empathy until manipulation became betrayal and betrayal became murder. Closing the file did not erase those lessons. It simply marked the end of her official responsibility. Inside the state correctional facility, Rebecca Carter settled into the rigid routine of prison life. Days blended into months and months into years. The respect she once enjoyed within Willow Creek existed only as distant memories. During counseling sessions, she often replayed the choices that had led her there. The hidden diagnosis, the lies, the manipulation, the violence. For the first time, there were no excuses left to hide behind. Only consequences. She eventually admitted that every decision made in fear had produced exactly the future she had tried so desperately to escape. She had not preserved her life. She had destroyed it. On the first anniversary of Ethan's death, Linda organized a community gathering at the Foundation's new resource center. Family, friends, investigators, healthcare workers, and survivors stood together beneath a simple photograph of Ethan smiling beside the lake he had always loved. Before the evening concluded, Detective Bennett stepped forward holding a small speaker. "This is something Ethan recorded during the investigation," she explained softly. "His mother wanted you to hear it." The room fell completely silent. Ethan's familiar voice filled the hall. "If you're trapped by fear, manipulation, or shame, please don't stay silent because you think nobody will believe you. Tell someone you trust. Ask for help before it's too late. Secrets protect people who abuse trust, but truth gives survivors a chance to reclaim their lives." When the recording ended, no one spoke for several moments. Some quietly wiped away tears. Others simply held the hands of those standing beside them. Although Ethan's life had ended far too soon, his final message continued reaching people he would never meet, reminding them that courage often begins with a single conversation. In that enduring legacy of honesty, compassion, and hope, the silence that had once empowered evil was finally replaced by truth, ensuring his voice would continue protecting others long after his own had been taken away.